Hello students. This is a short video to accompany week 8 of the micro course curriculum. The big thing this week, of course, for many of y'all will be preparing for the final quiz and obviously the final exam, which are both this week. So a few things to say about the material. Obviously, if you look at the week 8 module, you're going to notice that we mostly focus on empirical studies this week. And empirical here just means that you're looking at evidence about what's really going on in the economy, what kinds of performance are we getting from different markets. And especially with some of the studies we look at is an emphasis on survey work, reaching out to executives, VPs, board members, and accountants of these firms, to be surveyed, and just treating this as a research project. So what sort of, for example, pricing policies do you have? How frequently do you change your prices? What sort of elasticity among your customers do you encounter? What do your costs tend to do? So do you have increasing per unit or average costs, or decreasing costs, or what? That type of research. Not super common, it turns out, these days in the world of microeconomics, but there's a lot you can learn from the studies that do exist, and this week's unit presents you with a couple of those, especially the most prominent one, asking about prices by Alan Blinder, which ends up being a pretty big piece of research. We summarize the findings for you in this week's lecture material. You'll be glad to know. Take a look at those. Those are a big focus, obviously, of Quiz 8, but they frequently emerge on the final exam this week as well. And particularly, while you're looking at those studies, one major area to pay attention to is the one we just referred to, average costs, your per unit costs of production, or average total cost, as we described it in chapters 11, 12, and 13. So take a look at those. As you know, in our theoretical models from the latter half of this course, when we're building our theory of the firm, the assumption is that we're looking at what we call diminishing returns, basically meaning increasing costs. Your average total cost, your per unit cost of production, gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more units you produce. And this is considered to be a short-run phenomenon. Right? Well, what we'll discover is, as you look at these empirical studies, is that when executives and entrepreneurs are surveyed, more commonly than they report increasing costs, they report flat, like constant, or decreasing per unit costs, where the cost per unit of production gradually goes down over the relevant range of production. Okay? And that we call the spreading effect, or more commonly, economies of scale. So that's a big question. Do we see costs going up as you produce more, or going down? That sounds like it would be significant, doesn't it? And again, what we're going to see is that the reported results coming from the business world are significantly different from our theoretical expectation of diminishing returns. That's a significant area of divergence between the model and what we find empirically by doing surveys. So that's something that's focused on both on the quiz and on the final exam. Related to that is the issue of short run versus long run. So in this week's slides, you're going to discover that one way that firms are able to avoid diminishing returns is by planning in the long run, so that we don't experience this bottleneck of costs where our physical capital is fixed, and that makes the other inputs less productive, and that makes your costs go up. If you plan in the long run, while you're gradually using more and more of an existing factory, you build a fresh one, and you build it with some extra productive power, a little bit more than you expect to need, and we call that excess capacity. Excess capacity, extra productive potential. Build that factory to make somewhat more units than you think you're going to need right now. You're sort of planning for growth in the long run. Growth in production, growth in sales, growth in your business. It's a basic technique of industrial engineering for literally centuries. Since the early days of the Industrial Revolution, that's been appreciated. It's not really visible in that diminishing returns premise of the model of the firm. Okay, so that's a very relevant piece to pay attention to this week. We'll have a review session as well, hopefully online this week. All right, but that should give you enough of an idea of what to be focusing on for your studying. And of course, if you have questions about what could be on the final exam or on this week's quiz or any of these ideas, just shoot me an email, or you can bring it up on the discussion board as well. All right, excellent. Good luck. You guys are going to do great, I can tell.